Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is actually for personal trainers. It was requested by a personal trainer. However, this information is helpful for all listeners. And what it is in regards to is how to progress a client who is weak in physical strength. So how this kind of can be helpful for everyone is if you are weak in strength, so it can be helpful for you. But then also this information is applicable to kind of anybody's style of training, because we're going to kind of talk about pros and cons of different theories and ways in which people can get stronger. So even like intermediate or advanced lifters can benefit from knowing this if they don't know it already. So in general, if we look at trying to progress a client, and that would be in regards to like whatever their physical goals might be. So, and since this podcast is in regards to training, we're only going to talk about training. We're not going to talk about like nutrition progression or like goal adherence or that kind of stuff. So, more so, what would you do in their training to help a person progress, even if they're weak? And why that way? Why would we need to kind of classify that? Is the trainer who this discussion came up with was having trouble with clients who were weak making progress continuously. So for example, the client might come in, they might make like quick little progress, and then it kind of plateaued and it kind of like didn't really go anywhere from there. And the initial progress would have been mostly attributed to kind of like technical skill development of any repeated exercises. They just got better because they got better at the skill of it. So it's like riding a bike. You don't get physically stronger to ride a bike better. You get technically stronger. So you just get more coordinated with riding a bike. And then also the degree of the stimulus when somebody's brand new to lifting weights, anything you do is quite a shock because they're used to nothing. But eventually, they get used to what you do. So if at first a person can only chest press a 10-pound dumbbell, that's 10 more pounds than they've ever done. So that will get a response. They might be able to jump from 10 to 12s and then up to 15s, but then it's kind of like a slow go to try to get them from 15s any higher. So in our gym, we actually have 17.5-pound dumbbells and 22.5-pound dumbbells to help people make those progressions in those smaller increments. So we have from 10 to 12 to 15 to 17.5, 20, 22.5, 25. So, because if you think about it, going from 15 to 20, you have to add 5 pounds of strength on a 15-pound lift. That's a third. So you have to increase your strength by 33% to get from a 15-pound dumbbell to a 20-pound dumbbell. So sometimes having those smaller increments are helpful. But I got a little off track there. So technically, like what happens when somebody starts is everything they do is brand new. The body responds, but then it gets used to that response. So, for example, in the first month or two, 10-pound dumbbells are shocking. But then all of a sudden, 10-pound dumbbells are not that shocking. And we don't really get any technically better. We're technically okay at the lift. So how do you push even further? And especially if the person can really only lift 10 or 12 pounds. So we know for someone to progress in strength, there's a lot of kind of sciencey stuff involved with like neurological development. But in general, we know if somebody's going to get physically stronger, you have to put some heavy weight on them. So, and then their body has to respond by increasing the neural connection to the muscle to kind of fire off more of the muscle fibers at a faster rate. Also, you can look at like kind of trying to increase muscle tissue. That's almost always going to happen when you have somebody who's a beginner, even if they're on like kind of a maintenance level diet. Anytime they go off their diet and have small little incremental surpluses, the body's going to respond by trying to build that muscle tissue because the muscle tissue has to adapt to the new stimulus. So, if we start here, let's first look at kind of the areas that somebody can progress. Generally, there's 3. You can get physically stronger, you can get technically stronger, or you can get mentally stronger. And you would want to address all of those with any new clients. and anyone who's technically, like, quote-unquote weak, physically weak. Because maybe they're stronger than they actually are, but they just don't believe themselves to be. They're like, oh, this is the most I've ever lifted. I don't know if I can really do any more than this. So that's actually maybe a mental weakness, not a physical weakness. So that's something you can work on. And then, like we said, if somebody's brand new to a movement, they're going to be weak at it just because it's new. So, and again, the idea of that is riding a bike. You're not physically too weak to ride a bike when you first start. You're just not coordinated well. So as you repeat exercises more often, it's going to improve the technical skill. So there are various types of programming. One kind of thought process of programming is to create a lot of variety. If you have too much variety, you're not going to let the person develop their technical skills for basic movements of, say, like presses, rows, squats, and hip hinges, like deadlifts. So you want them to have repeated enough of kind of like very similar, if not the exact same exercise, so they can improve their technical skill of those movements. Because if they can get technically better at, say, you know, let's just go like a dual bent over row, where they're trying to like squeeze their upper back, learn to move their shoulders to involve their back contractions. You can then apply that to a one-arm row, a cable row, really anything. So once you learn a basic, good, solid movement, it's worth your time repeating that with a client so they can understand the basics of the concept of, say, a back contraction. And then you can apply that to other movements later on. So that's something to think of. If you're a trainer and you have somebody bouncing around all over the place and you're having trouble getting them stronger, you might need to pick a few things and do them more repetitively to let the person become technically stronger. Therefore, you're going to get heavier weight loads onto them, and then that heavier weight load will help kind of produce more strength. So that's something you can do technical. And then mental is just kind of coaching them up, you know, kind of getting them positive, giving them small little victories here and there. We'll maybe have to do a separate podcast on that because there's a lot of possibilities there. So I'll come back to that on another day. But that's definitely something to address, is if they don't have good confidence, find ways to build their confidence. And then the big one is physical development. So that's going to be kind of the biggest one, the most important one, is see if you can get them physically stronger. Now, physical methods of getting somebody stronger is generally most often with beginners and people who are kind of relatively weak, you're going to look at progressive overload. And what that means is, like we said, you're going to use repetitive exercises and try to increase the stimulus of overload that you've produced. So maybe in an exercise they did 20-pound dumbbells for 3 sets of 10. Their body is now used to that. So used to that weight, used to that volume, so the sets and reps. So now you have to do something overload above that to get the next kind of jump in strength development. So we would look at either adding weight. So maybe instead of 20-pound dumbbells, next time they come in they can use 22.5 if you have them, or even 25-pound dumbbells maybe. If they can't progress in weight, you want to try to progress them in more reps per set. So they would still use maybe the same weight, 20-pound dumbbells. They would still do the same number of sets, 3 sets, but maybe instead of sets of 10, they can now do sets of 11. So in their first workout, they did 20-pound dumbbells for 3 sets of 10. That's 30 reps. If you can find a way to get 31 reps out of the 3 sets at the next workout, that's progressive overload. So you just find a way to get extra weight, if you can safely, or extra reps per set. If you can't do either one of those, because those are by far the biggest bang for your buck in terms of strength development, you would then try to work on increasing sets. So maybe they still could only do 20-pound dumbbells, maybe they still only kind of squeaked out 3 sets of 10. You would then add a 4th set. And even if they only got 1 rep on that 4th set, that's a form of progression. And then finally, the last one you could use, but I'd recommend not doing so, is to lessen rest periods. So if they did, 20-pound dumbbells and 3 sets of 10, and that took them, say, 3 minutes, I'm just making up numbers, maybe this next time you can do it in 2.5 minutes. So something like that. But you don't really want to aim, if your goal is to get somebody who is weak stronger, making them move faster isn't a very direct way of doing so. You could argue that it increases their work capacity, and then over time you can stretch that work capacity back out, and hopefully that would make them stronger. Okay, there's some general maybe kind of like reaching what ifs with that. But most likely, what you want to focus on is getting them more weight in their exercises. So if they use 20s, try to get to 22.5s. Then if they can't do that, try to get more reps. If they can't do that, focus on more sets. Now, that's going to be your best way to do progressive overload, is in that order. And typically what I tend to do is repeat exercises, but not continually forever and ever and ever. So if we did a flat dumbbell chest press, and we worked on more weight, more reps, or more sets, and we could accomplish that every single time they worked out, in like 10 years, and we pressing like 400-pound dumbbells. So there is limitations to progressive overload. And what you would find is, if you had kind of one workout where it was kind of difficult to progress up in weight, reps, or sets, and you really couldn't do it, that's, sometimes you just have bad days. But if you have 2 workouts, or they're starting to get more frequent, like back-to-back workouts, or maybe, 2 out of the last 4 weren't good, it's probably better to now switch your exercise. So maybe instead of like a flat dumbbell chest press, you might go to a 30-degree incline dumbbell chest press and restart your progressions over again. You're still going to work on the chest muscles, like in the triceps, the front delts, like your pushing muscles. You still want to stay within those muscles, but you want to maybe switch to a different exercise. So for dumbbell rows, maybe if you're working on back, you might have them start with a one-arm dumbbell row with their hand and knee on the bench. And maybe after like, usually 8 to 16 workouts, you might switch to now a one-arm dumbbell row with their hand on the bench, but they get to put their both feet on the floor. So typically what you also want to do is try to progress. I do this because it's technically a little bit better, but it's maybe getting a little too technical for the podcast, is I progress them from a strong position to a limited position and back and forth, back and forth. So I might have somebody for 8 workouts, we do a flat dumbbell chest press. Then for 8 workouts, we do a 45-degree incline, or even an overhead press, knowing that those are weaker than a flat press. But they get progressed in that position, and then the next 8 workouts, we drop back down to the flat dumbbell chest press. So I might have an exercise A, okay, that I use for 8 workouts. I use exercise B, which let's just say is a 45-degree incline for 8 workouts. I come back to A for 8 workouts. Then I go to C, which is maybe a seated overhead press. Then I go back to A. So you can kind of do that where you have A, B, A, C, A, D. And then you can even go back through A, B, A, C, A, D and get like these repeated. So as a trainer who's trying to write programs for clients, sometimes we get a little too fancy. And you can make it basic, but not basic bad or basic lazy, basic effective. Where you might have, if we do 8 workout blocks, okay, let's say the person trains twice a week, so let's just say it's a month at a time. So month 1 would be A, month 2 is B, month 3 is A, month 4 is C, then maybe you go just back to A, B, A, C, okay? So that gives you 8 months right there that are well programmed. They will have the ability to progress on them. So that's 8 months of a sequence that you can follow. Then you can even push break your workouts down to a push, a pull, a squat, and a hinge. And then we'll talk a little bit later here how you probably still want to add some abs and some type of and that can be through like abdominal work, like direct crunches, planks. It can be through weighted carries. Like stabilization, bracing, anti-rotation, any kind of core-related work. So you might have those 5 components, and I'm just giving some samples here. So you have push, pull, squat, hinge, core. So you have those 5 components. You create an A, B, and a C for each of those. So that would be 15 kind of exercises. And then you can use that A, B, A, C, A, B, A, C sequence, and you have 8 months of programming right there. Okay? And then within those workouts, you would want to aim to progress for those 8 workouts that you're repeating the exact same exercises. You're going to try to progress in more weight, more reps, or more sets, and that'll be your main focus. So I have one client that I do a very basic variation of this with because it just works for her, and it doesn't need to be any more complicated. And we've been training for over 1.5 years, almost coming on 2 years, and maybe we've had 5 workouts where she didn't progress. And that's training somebody twice a week. So that's over 100 workouts that maybe we weren't able to make a progression in only like 5 of the workouts. So that's a 95% success rate that when she came into the gym, we could do something better that day than we did the last time. So 95% of the time, she was able to increase. So that's the idea. And that got her crazy strong. When we first started, she was doing the leg press empty and struggling. Now she leg presses 315 pounds for sets of 10. And meanwhile, this lady's in her 60s and doesn't have an athletic background. So she came into the gym to kind of prevent osteoporosis, but there was no athletic background to it. So that's pretty cool to see how far she's progressed. But that's all we did was just very basic linear progressions with those sequencing of changing exercises. So hopefully you guys have followed along with this. I know this is maybe a little more detailed because I am directing it towards trainers. But that gives you the basic ideas of progressions. Now, let's talk about exercise selections. And this is something that's very, very important, is typically we can break the exercises down to either free weights or machines. So free weights is dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, anything where the weight can move freely, hence the name, free weights, or machines. And machines are typically more guided movements, where the machine kind of moves only one way or so, and you can kind of just shove the machine through that pathway, but you don't have to stabilize the weight. So there are pros and cons to using free weights versus machines. I want to run through really quickly. Maybe with kind of the new age knowledge information, most trainers are going to be like, free weights all the way, man. So, but they'll talk about being more functional and applicable to outside life. And there's a ton of truth to that. However, there is absolutely benefit and need for machines from time to time. So let's go first through the pros and cons of free weights. So the pros of using free weights, which is again dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, stuff like that, is it builds your stabilizer muscles. So it's going to help them not only get physically stronger in their main mover muscles, it'll also build the strength and coordination and ability of their stabilizing muscles. So if we put somebody into a chest press, yes, they have to push the dumbbell, like let's say it's a dumbbell lying flat, like flat bench chest press. They have to push the dumbbell up and down, true. But they also have to prevent it from falling in like a horizontally 360-degree pathway. So as they're pressing up, we don't want to fall in on their face. As they're pressing up, we don't want to fall out away from them and rip their shoulder off. Same thing on the way down. We don't want to lose any teeth. We don't want to lose any shoulders. So the need for the stabilizer muscles to be more active is higher in free weights. So that's going to involve them more in the skill of them. So of how to technically use your stabilizers. Then also it kind of improves overall, using free weights, improves overall body stabilization, balance, coordination, proprioception, all the lovely stuff of learning how to move ourselves better. So that's going to help a ton of just outside of the gym health. So that way they move more healthily outside of the gym, if that's a word. Lower risk of injuries, not only outside of the gym, but also in the gym. So for you as a trainer, you know that they're going to get stronger and more resilient to more technically demanding and more physically demanding exercises you might want to use later on in the programming. Some of the cons of free weights, I'm trying to go through this quickly, guys, sorry, is if somebody is weak and they're kind of newer to lifting, one of the downsides to trying to use dumbbells, barbells, and kettlebells is they're too dang weak to like use anything significant. So maybe they can't even pick up a barbell. So they can't even bench press a barbell. Maybe they're trying to struggle to bench press like 15-pound dumbbells. That's not going to place a very great stimulus on the muscle fibers. So if you think how resilient and tough muscle fibers really are, if you put a 15-pound dumbbell divided by all the muscles in their arm and chest, that's not going to create a lot of damage, if any. So your physical development is going to be really slow using free weights with weak clients. They can get mentally developed, so maybe they get a little more mental strength and they can move up 5 pounds just because they're more confident. Maybe they get technical skill, so they get the skill of the movement and they can move up another 5 pounds because they're more coordinated. But then what? It kind of plateaus. And that's what that trainer who asked for this topic was talking about. is they can progress people easily in the first 6 months. So every trainer looks like a genius in the first 6 months. If you don't, but everybody, like almost anything works at first. So how do you get them from there? And this is an idea that you might be running into, is you might be using free weights, but they're just not strong enough to create muscular damage that would produce continued physical development. So they get a little bit of mental boost, they get a little bit of technical boost, but then it kind of flatlines, and that's because there's no physical development or physical increase. So then we also have like the other way that you can kind of build or shock muscles into growth, in strength growth as well, is just like that pump damage, that metabolic damage, where you can just annoy a muscle so badly and pump it up so much that it just has to respond by getting more efficient in its firing patterns, which would make it stronger, more efficient in its usage of resources, which might help improve endurance, but also improve efficiency of movement, so which might translate to strength. Blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of stuff in there. So the pump stuff can sometimes make you stronger, especially when you're newer to lifting. But if they're weak, they probably don't have really good work capacity. They probably can't do more than just one exercise, or maybe like a superset back-to-back. They get 1 or 2 supersets in the workout, and they're kind of fried. You don't have a lot to work with. There's a really low work capacity. Therefore, you're going to have very little physical development. And like we said, that's the downside to using free weights, is you can't significantly load the person well to get a physical development significantly. So, is progress still possible? Yeah, like we said, free weights will still get you progress, because you'll get confidence boost, you'll get technical boost, but then it'll flatline. And typically the reason why it's flatlining is because you don't have enough of that heaviness stimulus onto the body because of their limitations in weakness due to free weights. Now, that's where machines can help. So you can use machines because since they are balanced, it takes away the need for the body to balance the weight, and therefore it can put more resources, mentally, physically, blah, 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 towards the movement of the heavier weight through the guided movement pathway of a machine. So typically on machines you can go heavier than you can on free weights. So if you have somebody trying to do dumbbell overhead presses, you take that same equivalent weight to a machine overhead press and they can probably do more. So that's one of the benefits of machines, is you can get heavier weight load stimulus onto the person's muscles, therefore get a greater physical stimulus development to go along with that mental and maybe that technical stuff that you're getting out of the free weights, but you're going to get a bigger physical shock out of the machines, and therefore you're going to get faster progress. So, now the cons of machines, like we know, are they don't develop the skill of balancing weight. So when you use heavy weight on a machine, you're still firing off stabilizing muscles. They're still getting a stimulus, but you're not getting the coordinational, technical skill development of actually using them as stabilizers. Okay? And one of the other downsides of machines is there's not much core development. So that's why we talked about, out of the 5 elements of a basic training program, typically you want to still do direct core work of some sort, because when you do machines, their core it's addressed. Like if they're sitting upright, there's muscles in their core working, but they're not overloaded because the machine is balancing the weight for them. So their abdominal muscles and their lower back muscles and their inner core muscles don't have to fire to stabilize the weight. So those are kind of the cons, is it doesn't develop the skill of using the stabilizers, and it's kind of lower level on the core work. But the pro of machines allows you to go heavier and get that physical development to happen faster rate. So what do you do with all that stuff? All this information we've given you is you want to use both machines and free weights. So don't be a free weight fanatic and only use free weights. Use machines. They are helpful. They have their place. But also, don't just use machines. So I have been to commercial gyms and helped other gyms with trainer development, and sometimes the trainers just take the client from machine to machine to machine, and that is not good. So you got to mix in some free weights, okay? And again, because we want their strength or whatever development they get in the gym to apply to regular life. Everything in regular life is not guided and balanced. So you want to teach them how to be strong in all positions. And then also, like we said, that machines don't involve a lot of core work. So you want to get the free weights in to get the core involved. So, real quick, let's just go through 3 ways you typically set up machines and free weights in the same workout. Is sometimes you'll superset them both. So I might go from a machine overhead press to a dumbbell overhead press, or a machine chest press to a dumbbell chest press. That's a pretty aggressive way of doing it, but it works really well. And it's really good for teaching the client the pros and cons of the differences of machines and dumbbells. By making them directly side by side, you get a higher degree of contrast realization from the client, and they're going to be able to realize the pros and cons differences of each thing. So that's a cool way to do it if you want to kind of show them and kind of teach them these things, which people love being taught when they're being trained. So they want the physical workout, but they also, if you teach them things and you show them value in education, they're going to love your training sessions. So if you're a trainer out there and you're listening to this, definitely teach your clients. Take some time to invest into their knowledge. They're not going to leave you. It's not like they're going to learn everything you know in a month and all of a sudden never need you again. Plus, good for them. If you can teach them so well, if they no longer need you, you're a great trainer. Okay? That's your job, is to teach them how to be self-sustaining in life. Teach them how to reach their goals and like how they got there and what they had to do to get there, so that way they can keep their goals for the rest of their life. So if you help somebody lose 30 pounds, but they don't know how to do it themselves, what the hell? Like when they leave you, or when life gets in the way and they have to move, or you change jobs, or this or that, they're just going to gain all that weight back, or they're not going to know how to go on from there. So, definitely take time to teach them. I think it's a great investment into them as a person, and it actually makes you a better trainer as well. So if you have to teach someone why you're doing what you're doing, that's going to make sure that you damn well know why you're doing what you're doing. So another way we have is you might do like a superset or circuit of machines, give the person a little bit of a rest, and then do a superset or circuit of the same muscle groups but in free weights. That's kind of a cool way to do it again, and that's a good way to kind of group it differently if you're looking for some variety in your training. And then also, if a person trains twice a week, maybe one time a week you have them on machines, maybe one time a week you have them on free weights. So you just kind of mix them in. There's a couple like other ways and stuff, but that just gives you some ideas. So if you're looking to progress a weak client, you want to look at not only pumping them up, giving them good self-confidence, like giving them repetitive enough actions that they can get technical skill development, but you need to get that physical development. And if they're weak, if they're physically weak, you're not going to get that just from free weights alone. Okay? So you have to add in machines, and you want to create a mixture of free weights and machines. And in all of those, in what you use and what you do for exercises, you have to make progressive overload in a sense. So you have to add more weight, add more reps, add more sets in some way over time. So tracking that stuff helps a ton. I usually write some of it down for some of my clients. Some of my clients I just remember it because it's fun and we worked forever. So I have some clients I've worked with for 7 or 8 years. So it's just kind of like second nature now. But if you're just starting, definitely write that stuff down. So that way, if you're having a hectic day, brain's fried, life's getting the better of you outside of the gym, you don't have to try to memorize all that stuff. So the client isn't going to care if you're writing it down, because if you explain to them why you're writing it down, like, hey, this will make you better. We're going to write this stuff down. You can see the ways in which you're progressing. So show them every workout. Get them involved in the process. Tell them what their goal is that day. Say, hey, last time we did 3 sets of 10. We got 30 reps at this weight. Let's see if we can improve on that. So get them involved. Get them in conjunction with what's going on. So help them understand, like we said, learn and teach. So hopefully this was helpful. So for the trainer who asked for this, hopefully the last 30 minutes of your life was worth the time spent. Okay, so if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, you can sign up to become a patron of the podcast by donating $10 a month towards the podcast, and for your donation, we'll send you free programming. So, and if you are a trainer, we have programming you can use for your clients. So we have conceptual programming that you can just plug and play in any exercises you want. Okay. If you'd like to become a patron, you can do so directly on the Podbean app. You can send us an email or do a Google search for Brutal Iron Gym, become a patron. And if you like the podcast, you can share it with family and friends. So the more people we help, the happier the world will be. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, like